Coming up on the Payoff, we sit down with Wes Cunningham. Wes was a recording artist on the Warner Brothers label, starred in a major motion picture, but most importantly, he has got quite a few years of sobriety, and he had quite the journey in sobriety too. Great visit with Wes. But first, Kevin Sousa.
Stand by the ocean floor.
So the artist on here that we came into, it's my brother Kevin.
That's him singing.
Yeah.
No
Otherwise it would be Wes Cunningham.
Oh, that's so cool. I hadn't heard that before, but
Yeah.
that was really cool, man. That's your brother.
That's my brother
No
Kevin.
way.
Yeah.
That's some rock.
You were recording a recording artist on a major label, right?
Right. Uh-huh.
Feature film. You were the star of a feature film. It's just true. But you're also,
It's strangely true, yeah.
and you're also sober.
And I'm also sober, right?
October of 06 is when you stopped.
That's
drinking.
right.
Yeah. And this is a lot of stuff for people who don't know. Wes and I know each other pretty well.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of stuff about you I don't know. Like when the first time you got drunk. When was the first time you got drunk?
This is fantastic.
Yeah, the first time. If you remember the first time you
Sure.
got drunk?
Yeah. First time, my friend Bill Blankenship's mom got a bottle of wine. She was a teacher, and she was able to, she went to bed. I think we were 6th grade, 7th grade. We grabbed it and went to town. That was it.
A lot of people say I got drunk and then I threw up, but I couldn't wait to do it again. Like, what was your feeling?
Yeah, that's interesting. I've heard that too. I'm not that way. I didn't immediately go, oh, this is it. I hear that a lot, and that came later for me. Initially, it was just fun, and
Did it make you feel?
You know what? Here's the thing. I was a good kid, so I was responsible for I'm the oldest of 4. I felt my parents sort of instilled in me like I'm like sort of the third parent, kind of thing. So I really felt compelled to put on a good example for my siblings and to carry the weight a little bit, and I did. I didn't want to disappoint my parents. I had a great childhood. My parents are awesome people. Still really still friends with them today, and I'm still friends with my siblings. That's what's crazy about this thing, right? Is that I have no excuse. I have no excuse.
Yeah. Well, do you think
I've had everything?
Like, is there alcoholism in your family?
There is. No, there's really not. There's an uncle or aunt back there, but it's not a big thing in my family. My wife's family, there is.
Yeah.
So my kids are screwed. But yeah, I started to get, in high school, you start to use it more to get comfortable, to ease into the situation. And then for me, like my whole thing with music, music goes, I always wanted to be John Lennon, or I wanted to have a band like his band. And I read about all those guys are my heroes growing up. Even if it's Hank Williams or Johnny Cash or any of those dudes, but they were all kind of crazy, reckless people with various substance abuses and tendencies. And I don't know. I think I kind of romanticized that a lot. So when I started playing music, I started drinking when I played, and that just went hand in hand. That was just like. Here's the thing, I loved it. Once I started in high school, I was torn between being the responsible kid and the rock guy. And I just was always on one side of that fence or the other. And one of them was the straight and narrow, and the other one was the lifestyle I really wanted to do. And the thing is with drinking, I just one thing that I resonate with other alcoholics is that once I started, I was just, I was going. You'd have to have a few beers before you got up on stage, and then you'd have to have some after you played, and all that stupid cliche stuff about,
being a rock star.
Being a rock star, yeah.
Dude, I get that.
But the problem was I would, stay up really late, and then we'd have to get up in the morning, and I'd feel terrible, and what would fix that is a few beers, and so then it just became this whole lonely thing where I was hiding stuff all the time, and always sort of felt never could quite get to where I wanted to get, feeling good about myself. And anyway.
how did that make you feel when you had that moment when you noticed? Because I remember how I felt, like, oh my gosh, like I'm drinking in the morning now.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, I remember the first time I drank in the morning, it was a Sunday. We were going, we were going to see a Villanova basketball game. I was in high school and I ran down to the basement. I was out all night the night before and I drank a Coors Light and I was like, I discovered plutonium, I was like, this is it, but like this stuff does, it comes back around on you. Right. But with the moment when you're saying, hey, now I gotta have a couple drinks, like, do you remember that feeling, what that was like?
That didn't happen until later. I always felt like I lied to myself that I had some control over it, and I would do, I could do days off. I could do days off pretty easy until I couldn't. Mm-hmm. I think really it was such, drinking was just such an escape to just to have fun and for, enjoy life. And it was so built in, even when I married my wife, we were both just good timers. We just loved to go out and have fun. And it just didn't register that this was not a sustainable kind of lifestyle. But I do remember, yes, to answer your question, I mean, but it didn't happen until much later. I'd already moved. I was drinking a pitcher of beer before I'd get up on stage on play. And I thought that was probably bad. I probably shouldn't be doing that.
But you're also playing music. So,
yeah.
And that's, I want to backtrack a little bit. So,
yeah, let's backtrack.
So you're in high school, you start to quote unquote use it, and then you start to achieve success with music. How does that go?
One thing I hear a lot in the rooms is the idea of like being exceptional, like rules don't apply, like being other than. And I definitely felt that. And I don't know if that was ego or if that's just the way I was built, but I definitely felt rules didn't apply to me. And so when I was in high school and we'd, me and my buddies, we'd work up these songs, we'd make them up, and then we'd go, well, we got to play them somewhere. And we'd go downtown and we'd convince actually what we'd do is we'd call the bars and pretend like we were our own managers, and we'd set up the gigs, and just BS our way through it. And then we were high school, we'd show up and they wouldn't, the gig was already booked. And so we'd go play, but none of our friends could get in because they were all too young. It was one of those things. It was like, it sort of solidified the idea that like we were cooler than, different. And drinking has a lot to do with that, but also just, being outside of the mainstream was sort of intoxicating, just
almost like an outlaw.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, right.
Yeah.
It wasn't. But anyway, so high school was high school, and then I went to college, and then I went to Nashville, and then I started making some demos in Nashville. And really that's the route it took. Then I got signed out of Los Angeles.
You go to college. You grew up in Fort Worth or Dallas.
Yeah, I grew up in Dallas. Yeah.
And then you go to college at Baylor.
Yes. Uh-huh.
So you go to college at Baylor, and then you graduate Baylor. You go to Nashville, mm-hmm. And then the move to Nashville. I know a little bit about you, right? So the move. Nice. I've been paying attention, man. So the move to Nashville. That's when you make the leap, as far as a professional musician.
Yeah, I never really had a plan. I just thought I was going to Nashville. Nashville was less, less scary than LA or New York. So I went to Nashville. Had a couple friends there.
So you go there. You're playing gigs. You're making demo tapes.
I go there. I've just got a big attitude. There's a lot of Christian music in Nashville, and I grew up in the church, and I've always sort of held Christian art and Christian music, especially, at arm's length. And so I think there's further me distinguishing myself from that, because there's a big sort of what I saw as sort of a cringy music scene in Nashville that was, and also like just the fact that there were this idea of rich Christian rock stars that just didn't resonate. There's several acquaintances that I had that were doing quite well writing, praise choruses. And I remember just thinking that it was not for me. And so again, with the rebel thing, I wanted to distinguish myself in Nashville. But yeah, Nashville is country and Christian, but there was still a little bit of the rock scene, and that's what I plugged into.
Now, are you playing clubs at night?
Playing clubs at night. It's not as romantic as it would seem, I mean, really, this was in the late 90s, and this was just as Napster was starting to crack open.
I remember.
So the old world was sort of the old world of you sign an artist and you work with them for 2 or 3 records, and Tom Petty, and the first record doesn't do well, but you stick with your artist and you develop a sound, and that whole ideology was, stepping aside because all of a sudden music's free and it's all about the hit and all that stuff. So anyway, so that was the culture that I stepped into with music, and here's an interesting story. I don't know if I was thinking about this the other day. When I was in Nashville, I'd worked writing music, and I'd worked really hard to get attention. And finally I did, and my record, my demo got shopped around, and I got to go different New York and LA, and people wanted to put it on their their label. It was all very heady, and I remember at the time I wanted to go to this. I always told myself, if I sign a record deal, I'm going to go to this one bar. That was kind of, and forgotten about this until recently. And it was in February, and I was like,
this is in Nashville.
This is in Nashville. And the day came, and we did the deal, and I actually signed it in Nashville, sending faxes back and forth. And then that afternoon I did it, right? So no one knew about me or anything, but I'd signed this big record deal, and they were going to put my record.
What label?
Out. Warner Brothers.
Okay.
Out of Burbank, LA. So I went to this bar, and it was just me and a friend, and then the friend left, and it was just me. And then it got dark, and it was like sleeting, and I was still in the bar, and I just got wasted. And I remember that hollow feeling was there, and it shouldn't have been there. And I remember thinking, this shouldn't be this way. I should be really happy, and I was instead not. It's just a weird memory.
But on a night that should be one of the most celebrated in your life.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And honestly, knowing you now, that's a night where you would probably have a fulfilling evening.
Right. Yeah.
And do something with your wife or your kids, or connect with people that you love and but now you're sitting at a bar by yourself. And then what happens? You stay in Nashville and make music?
No. Let's see what happens. I went on the road, played with some cool bands, got to open up and
what bands?
Well, I got to play some with Wilco. I opened for Chris Isaak on a 2-month tour, so I got to hang out with him and his crew, which are really neat, super cool dudes. Who else? Just lots of you just do all these summer tours, and so you'd be playing with Los Lobos or I don't know, just cool, interesting alternative rock type of people. And so yeah, that was really fun. And
at that point, where's the drinking at?
At that point, the drinking is, I feel like it's still manageable. I feel like, here's the thing, I'll go and make an ass of myself, and just, because I have such an ego, I would just be mortified about it, and I'd hold off for a day or two, and then I'd go do it again. I just sort of had this cycle of, calling up people like, dude, what'd I do? Or I'm sorry, or, it's so funny, Pete, we're sitting in here talking about this stuff. It's like, I don't want to talk about any of this stuff. Like, I want to talk about how my life is now. But I know we have to talk. I know we have to
talk
go
about
through
this. Yeah,
we got to go through it.
We have to go through this. Yeah, we gotta get through it.
Okay,
and we're all,
let's get through it. Let's get through it.
Okay,
here's a good.
You guys have no idea how many times I've tried to get this dude to open up about this stuff. And it's like, we've sat at Lolita's trying to have tacos, and Wes does not want to go there. But I've always been curious about this. And I think, the idea of this podcast too is to, I want people that are listening to be able to hear you and relate to your pain. Yeah. And then hear where you are today. One of the things about you, I can remember it was like 2 years ago, we were hanging out, and like often you do, and just hang in there and take this compliment. You have like a light coming off you. And I remember sitting with you somewhere and being like, this dude's on fire. And he doesn't want to talk about what I, as a materialistic person, would see as this glorious time in his life. And you're like, I want to talk about now. And I'm like, this is amazing. He wants to talk about his kids or his wife, or find out what's going on with me. Yeah. Real stuff. Not the BS. And that's kind of in a nutshell what this whole podcast is about. It's about people understanding that it's not all it's cracked up to be.
Okay. Yes, I get it. And I not that I want to sit here and talk about drunkalogs, which is not the point either.
Uh-huh.
But relating to the despair, the utter aloneness, the duplicity of constantly having to hide, the abject fear of where is this going? I was at a bar and someone said, I was going to see another guy play, and I'm a big fan of this guy, and I came up to him and I just was drunk off my ass, slobbering all over him, And my buddy said, "Man, you know what, Wes, you may have a drinking problem." This was, years before I walked into AA, and I was just so taken aback by that. I was like, "What? This is what I do. Is who I am. This is, whatever." I mean, it would just surprise the crap out of me. But then when I look back and I say, here's a good story. When I got signed, actually, there was a record label in New York that wanted to sign me, and they flew me out there, and they were introducing me to this new person that was going to be this big hit person, and her name was Britney Spears, and I was like, oh, whatever, it's like, she wasn't a star or anything, but it was like that was their new rollout, and even then I had attitude about it. Anyway, but I was there and I was meeting all these fancy.
Is this Jive Records or
Jive Records?
Yeah.
Like, wow, look at you.
Yeah.
I'm meeting all these fancy people. It's at the Waldorf Astoria. Goo Goo. I'm sitting at the table with Goo Goo Dolls, and back then they were.
Yeah, this is like 1998, 1999. This is a big deal.
It's as big as you get. Right?
Yeah.
And of course, dude, flash forward like 3 hours later, and I'm on the steps, basically in the lobby of the Waldorf with a guitar, and I'm singing, John Lennon songs, and I have this, and the next memory I have is waking up in a New York City hotel in the stairwell in my underwear, and having no idea how I got there, where my room was, and I was expected back in Texas for a family reunion, like later that day.
Did you get there,
dude? I got there, and I don't know how. So I just went around looking for I found my way out of the. Anyway, it's a whole other story. But yes, I found my room and called the car.
So clearly,
this is not. I'm not going.
This is not a tenable situation. No, even if you're in the music industry.
That's right.
And I know you well enough to know. Again, we don't have to go through all of it, but the alcoholism, from what I've understood, isn't what took you out of music.
Right. Correct.
Necessarily. The one thing that I want to get to
lack of interest in my music.
It depends on who you ask. You have this one story, and before we get to you getting sober, and I that I love, that's kind of like grandiose, and it's not who you are, but you go to record your second album.
So the first album, I signed a 2-album deal, and the second one, they gave me all this money per the arrangement, and said, go make this record, and of course I'm thinking I'm the next, whatever. I hire a producer, and we decide to go record strings over in London at this renowned studio.
What are strings, by the way?
Strings,
people that don't
orchestra.
know. Okay.
We did an arrangement for several of my songs, and I just, I'm going for this massive sound. Like
you're going for it.
I'm going for it, and it's the whole stupid cliche is like, we don't hear hits, but I'm like, I'm an artist and all that. And I don't really regret the music I made. But interestingly, I went over there to record strings, and there's this orchestra in this beautiful studio waiting to record music that I wrote, and such an amazing experience. The night before, we were going to go in to record with this orchestra. Of course, I got really drunk, and because the beer apparently has a lot more alcohol in it over there. Whatever. So
hard lesson to learn.
So I basically stay out all night, and then when I get up in the morning, I'm feeling so terrible that I actually kind of. Are we talking about this? I mean, how many details do we want
whatever you're comfortable with.
Yeah. So I didn't show. It's
you blew it, so you didn't show up.
I blew it. I did show up, but I had a mess in my pants. Okay, Pete, I had a mess in my pants.
Okay. No wonder you were asking about editing. Yeah.
and I'm in the studio, and then I go to the bathroom, and I don't. Okay, well, we can edit that part out.
Yeah. We get the idea.
So the idea, yeah, the same thing happened in Nashville, by the way, when there was going to be this big gig, and I was meant to show up and wow everybody because this was like a showcase. This was my coming out, and dude, that afternoon, I went and got some beers and had my girlfriend, and we went to the park and we fell asleep. And I came home and I just passed out, and I got a call from my producer friend, and he was like, dude, where are you? Everybody's waiting. And I just scrambled and showed up. And by that time, people had left. I mean, that's the kind of thing. Whenever there was a big thing coming, for whatever reason, I would
implode.
I would implode. I would totally. I don't know what that was.
What was the moment when you decided, okay, I'm getting sober?
Yeah.
You know, this isn't about white lights or,
I
you know, yeah. What was there a moment when you said, I've got to change? What was the jumping off point for you?
Right.
Or the turning point?
This is a good question, because I feel like there were several. And what's interesting is that my initial reaction was not alcohol is not the problem. My reaction was, I'm not being a responsible person, or I need to get a job, or I need to, like initially I was like, I got to go marry that girl. When I marry that girl, she's going to straighten out how I feel inside, and that will take care of the alcoholism and whatever, you know, that will take care of my drinking part. And instead I'm going to fly right, you know, so we did that. And I still found myself after a few months going at it hard, and she was making comments, and so then it was like, all right, well, I'm going to move back to Texas, and I'm going to take this, you know, I'm going to serve people, and I'm going to do good works, and I'm going to like throw in with this nonprofit, and
I'm going to eat some humble pie.
Yeah.
And make a difference.
Yeah.
A real difference.
I'm going to make a difference. But it was on my.
But I'm still going to drink.
But yeah, I'm still going to drink. It was on my terms, you know. I'm going to do this. I'm going to make myself better. I'm going to pull myself out of this deal. So I kept trying to pull myself out of the deal with religion, with my wife, with doing good, you know, all these things couldn't stop. I just didn't stop, to the point where, you know, I'm actually trying to do some kind of good with my music. And so I agreed to lead some hymns or some music, Christian music stuff, which I never did before, but I'm like, well, this is the life that I needed. You know, I felt like I needed to do this. And so I would even drink before I would do that, you know, just to, so the answer to your question, when I really knew, when I had my moment of clarity, which for me was undeniable, and it had to be messy, and it had to be disgusting, and it had to be humiliating. And that's what it took for me. It was a great leveling of my ego, and I could give you the details, but basically my wife was out of town, and I got drunk, and she came home, and she found me incapacitated. And I saw the reaction of her face as she walked in the door, and she's standing there, and she's holding, we had just had our second kid. And so she's holding one of them on one hand, and the other one she's got him, you know, on the hip, and she's standing there sort of like silhouetted in the window. And I'm on the couch, barely cognizant. And all of a sudden it was like, holy shit, I'm going to lose it. I'm going to lose it all. And it's because I can't get on. It's because of it's because of this.
Yeah.
I have a problem.
When I've heard a guy say, when you're truly an alcoholic, you're the last to know.
Yeah. Yes, that's exactly what it was.
And it's like wherever you go, not to throw all the cliches up, but wherever you go, there you are. It can be religion. It can be yoga. It can be, for me, I always thought, well, I'm going to run. I'm a runner.
Yeah.
I would go out and I would have 1,000 beers, right? And then the next morning, if I could get up and go running, then it was okay. And really that helped me, because it would give me those endorphins.
Totally.
Right? That would like, okay.
It would justify it too.
Would totally
I can
justify it.
still run.
Yeah. Oh, and I just earned, I can go drink again.
That's right.
And so, I mean, I was in that vicious cycle for years. I remember a buddy of mine, my buddy Bart. I remember hearing this secondhand that Bart said, that guy thinks he can go for a run every day and everything's fine, and it's not. And that's when, for me, the walls were totally closing in. So you have this moment, this turning point moment. First of all, you always hear you never pull up to recovery or meetings in a limo. People, and that's the beautiful thing too about being sober is you go to a meeting, you get around other people who are sober alcoholics, and there's an energy there.
Yeah.
Even you and I talking right now, two sober dudes, there's an energy in the room that if you and I were just coming off a bender and coming into our first meeting, we crawl in here, there'd be no energy.
No.
We'd be sitting here staring at each other thinking about the next drink. Or I'd be thinking about, look at this dope.
Look at this dope.
Yeah, what's he talking about? And you hear that, right?
Yeah.
So how do you walk into that first meeting? Wes Cunningham, what's it, in October of 2006?
Yeah. Okay, so first of all, I'm just absolutely bewildered. My wife says, you need to call my dad. And I knew that I needed to call her dad. Her dad is this asshole, drunk, who had at the time 20 years of sobriety, who I did not like. I didn't enjoy his company.
So he's an asshole to you.
He's an asshole to me.
Okay.
I'm defensive on behalf of my wife because I think he's an asshole to her. I've never liked him. But I respect him, and I respect his sobriety. I'd noticed through the years that he was a big Alcoholics Anonymous guy. So he went to a lot of meetings. He had 20 years of sobriety, and just the way that he carried himself with this sort of irreverent devil may care attitude, but also perfectly cool with himself, like really liked himself. That's part of the reason why I liked him and didn't like him, right? But he had a magnetism about him, and he was free. I mean, inside he was free, and I could tell. And it was different from like a religious free. Somehow, the dude was just, there were no rules here.
Wearing life like a loose shirt.
That's exactly right. So I called him. He lives in Houston. Hey, Bobby, I think I need to talk to you about alcohol stuff, And he starts laughing because he'd seen me through the years. He'd seen the way that I drank, So he was kind of waiting for this call, I think. And he actually, which this is the miracle part, right? This is the spooky part. He was actually in Waco when I called. He's never in Waco. He was passing through, happened to be there right when I called. He said, I'll be by in 15 minutes. And my wife and I, neither of us knew he was in town. He came by and picked me up. And I went to my first meeting. And here's the thing that I remember is not so much that, oh, thank goodness, I was still bewildered and very confused, but that little bit of letting go of, I don't know what to do. That was the freeing part for me. Everything else would come later, and I'd go to the meetings, and I'd sit there and bitch and moan for months, but I kept going. But initially I was just, and I will say this though, and this was this particular grace from higher power, I guess, I don't know. Because when I walked into that meeting, there were a bunch of people who did not look like me. And I did feel a peace. I felt just a kind of, it's okay. That feeling right there is so profound. It's okay. That's why I kept coming, even though I didn't understand all the stuff. And they maybe even didn't consider myself alcoholic at the time. I just knew that when I walked in there, I was okay. So yeah, Bobby took me to my first meeting. And
that moment where you go from being separate and comparing yourself out to becoming a part of is magical. I mean, I fought that for so long. You see that guy, the guy Bob Forrest, who is I think he's a sobriety counselor. He's a therapist. He used to tour with the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and then Bob got sober.
Did he write a book?
Yes. I think it's Bob and the Monster. I think, don't quote me. So he says an addict right before he gets sober or before he dies is literally has this horrible life that he's clinging to, right? And he will not let anybody get near. He's like, get away from me. It's like, dude, you don't have a job. You're homeless. You're broke. And you're fighting people off that are trying to give you help. And that's what, and then all of a sudden you make that decision, right? That willingness, whether it's to walk into a meeting or to talk to another alcoholic. And I can hear you breathe. It's just like, whew. For me, it was like, I went to rehab. I was like, it's over.
Dude.
It's over. And I started to become a part of and stop comparing myself out. And it's a major, I mean, it's something that you'd have to experience. You could call it spiritual. Some people call it God, whatever you choose to call it. It's bigger than me. You start going to meetings and then, and what changes? Like, how does that whole situation develop?
Hi, I'm Hank. You might remember me from a show called King of the Hill. Check out a King of the Hill rewatch podcast. These boys ain't right, but they are funny. Find the podcast anywhere you get your podcasts or at roguemedianetwork.com. I tell you what.
I took it, this is what's amazing, just what you said. I took it literally. Like, I went in there, and I think maybe the next meeting I went in, I found someone, and I said, I need to talk to you. I need to unload. And I don't know if it was a step or what, but I just needed to,
He mentions, Wes is talking about the 12 steps. Yeah.
I needed to talk to somebody, and I did that. Okay. Immediate connection, immediate valid. I mean, just immediate. It's that what we talked about. Like, yes, being a part of was such a deep breathing relief. But here's the thing I want to mention too. We kind of glossed over this, but I thought I drank because I didn't have any more status. I'd lost my record deal. I'd moved to this crappy town called Waco. I was trying to work with this nonprofit thing, helping people. That wasn't working. I was drinking more than ever working, helping people, quote unquote. I mean, I was a basket case. And then I basically got fired. I didn't get fired, but maybe you should go, Wes, kind of thing. So I didn't have a job, and I have a wife with 2 kids who's severely disappointed with me. Always wanted me to be some kind of spiritual leader, and I'm anything but. She married this fun guy, and all of a sudden, where is he? I mean, and I had such self-loathing, and that of course is the cycle with drinking too. You drink to feel better, and then you feel worse, and the whole thing. So I wanted just to say that a big part of my self-loathing had to do with my financial insecurity, and the fact that I was not able to I'd failed at being a rock star, and I'd failed at providing for my family, and now I can't stop drinking, and then so there was a level of despair that but when I came into when I started going to meetings, slowly I began to listen to what dudes were saying about, dumb little cliches like one day at a time. And I started to feel a part of, and I made a couple of friends, and I was the guy in the meeting that kept saying, yeah, I'm glad this works for you, but what about me? What about me? At some point I made a decision, and it was an active decision to trust my higher power with my financial future, and set drinking aside for a minute. Like, that was a huge point in my life, because for the next 2 years, I would get jobs doing odd jobs, and they were on the surface not humiliating jobs, but just, hey man, I know this guy, he's a painter. He needs somebody to go scrape the house and prep it before they paint it. And it was, here's what's so crazy is that job that paid $8 an hour, $10 an hour was I had this attitude of I was so grateful for that work. And I'd show up and I'd do the job and I'd listen to, whatever. And occasionally I'd be like, wait a minute, I used to play on stage for all these people and now I'm doing, that would crop up. But then I would be like, no, every night I'd go to bed thinking that was great. I don't know where I'm going to work tomorrow. And someone would call or I'd find something. So what I learned in those first couple of years of sobriety, just by showing up and by being open, was that I felt like it was God telling me that you know what, dude, you don't have to worry about, I can take care of this. I got this. You just keep showing up and the rest will take care of itself. And that was just a really literal way for me to understand that concept because I had to. And it got to the point where it was really fun at the end of the couple of years. Like, I don't know what's going to happen, but something great will happen. Dude, I had that attitude. Like it's going to work out. It's going to be great too. You never know.
I lived in a recovery house. I had nothing.
Yeah.
I worked in the NBA. I crash and burn. And I'm in a halfway house working at a KFC.
I love the KFC.
Awesome. I tell you what, I didn't, and then I did. Yeah. And that's the point. I loved going to work there. And what you're sharing to me and with what I experienced was, first of all, I knew it didn't define who I was. Mm-hmm. I knew it was an esteemable thing. I for those people who are just listening, I got sober. You go to live in a recovery house after you go to rehab. I decided, I didn't decide, I said I would. I'm in a recovery house. They're about to, you can't stay if you don't have a job. And I ended up working at a Kentucky Fried Chicken. Mm-hmm. And for about 3 months. And it's an esteemable act mm-hmm. where, like you just said, you build confidence. Mm-hmm. Like every day doing those odd jobs that you were talking about gives you a confidence in yourself. And now all of a sudden you're moving and grooving and you become an attractive person, as I experienced it. And people are now asking you to do things that you, oh, by the way, want to do. Right. And that's the magic of this whole program and this process and being sober is like, you become that magnetic, charismatic person.
Can I say one last thing?
You can say whatever you want.
So you're exactly right. And I'm banking all of these 2 years. I'm just putting it in the bank in terms of, this is just my truth here, but like God is trustworthy. Like I can trust God with my family, I can trust my concept of God, which by the way, is different than it was before I came in. Yeah. So, I mean, it'll probably be different in 2 years. My concept of God, I feel like changes a lot. But what I do know without doubt is that I'm not running the show. And when I can, that's what those 2 years taught me was that, dude, when you can just loosen your grip a little bit and be present and just do esteemable acts, it takes care of itself.
And that is, and that's for some people, God. Mm-hmm. The idea of we go to a meeting where a woman says, you come in at your first meeting and you hear people talk about God, you could run right out of the room. Right. So this isn't so much about God; it's about it being bigger than you. I agree. And if you grew up with God in your life, then it's much easier for you to connect. For me, it was. I didn't have a terrible experience with God. Some people do, whatever. But to acknowledge it's bigger than you. Now, this shows that it's bigger than us. And I don't even know if I've told you this, but this is a fact. I remember I'm living in Louisiana. I'm sober probably 5 or 6 years. I don't know. And I go to the movies all the time because I have nothing to do. I live in Louisiana. I have no friends. And I live with my dog, but I'm loving life.
You didn't go noodling or
no
gigging crawfish? Or?
I mean, I did. A crawfish are a pain in the ass because they take too long. I want to eat it right away.
Catfish noodling.
Yeah, but I go to the movies, and dude, the movie that you made, this is probably was it? I saw a trailer for your movie.
Did you really?
Yeah, I remember it so well. Maybe I wasn't living in Louisiana at the time. Maybe I was living in outside of Philadelphia, and I remember seeing a trailer for your movie. Wow! And I remember the last part of the trailer, folks. You can see it on YouTube. The movie is called Seronia. Is when you're sitting with the kid, and you're playing music, and you're talking about the Beatles. Who was the best Beatle?
That's right. Yeah.
And you don't forget that. And the trailer is unbelievable. Yeah. And the movie's good too. It really is. So tell me about this experience, because as I see it, and I could be totally wrong, you get sober, we're talking about esteemable acts, you're kind of on fire, you're living in Waco, and you have the chutzpah, I guess you would say, to chase this idea of making a major motion picture.
Right. Yeah, I didn't plan it that way, but what's cool is that once I stopped drinking, I kind of did wonder what music was going to be in my life. Like, what's the role of music? And like I said, I started to, do some worship leading stuff, but that's not necessarily who I am either. I like to create and write music. That's really my passion, is what I love to do. And I thought, I don't know if I'm going to can do this without booze. The things that you love to do when you're drinking, whether it's sex or music or any of that stuff.
Talking to people, you feel you can't do it without
people,
drinking.
You feel like you can't do it, right? Yeah. Exactly. So that was another gift of this thing. I almost had to say, well, maybe I won't. I mean, like I had to. That's how serious I took sobriety initially. Is that I said, well, maybe maybe I'll never play music again. Like I really had to surrender that. And of course, just like you said, you start living life. You start. You develop some friendship. You start to feel pretty good about yourself because, you're not carrying around all this guilt anymore, and you have and you're helping people. This is a big part of it, is being a part of other people's lives, right? Who are in sobriety. But then I started making music and writing songs again. It was really fun, and I had zero ambition behind it. It was just fun to write. I still had some recording equipment. And send it to a buddy. Well, you know me. If you're a friend of mine, I'll send you.
Which is a gift.
I'll send you songs that I write. It's just. So I kept sending my buddy all these different songs I was writing, and he was a director in LA. He did a lot of music video stuff. And anyway, the long story short is he actually moved to Waco, and we started working together on the screenplay, along with another friend. And we had so much fun, zero expectations, like trying to write a story about a guy. This is kind of far-fetched. You just have to use your imagination. It's about a guy who used to be in the music industry, who moved to a small Texas town, and who tried to live a happy, meaningful life without being somebody, And that's what the movie is kind of trying to be. Him dealing with just being another bozo on the bus, just being a dude. Anyway, so I had all this music that I'd been writing, and we put it all in this big pot, and we said, how can we make a movie using this music? And we just sort of went from there. We wrote out a screenplay, not thinking it would go anywhere. And then miraculously it got financed. And the next thing I know, there's crews from LA in Waco filming, and then we go to LA and film some, and it was about a 4-week shoot. All this was new to me. I'd never been in, but it was,
And you're the star of the movie.
And oh yes, and I'm
Jeremy Sisto is in the movie with you.
Yeah.
Right.
Tony Hale.
So Tony Hale is from Veep and Arrested Development.
Yes.
Jeremy Sisto is in a lot of big movies. Look them up if you don't know who they are. But it's easier to relate and identify with just kind of how massive this project was.
Yeah.
And is that kind of heady? You're sober. You're going through that. What's that like? That's quite a ride.
It is quite a ride. And what it did, it was not necessarily healthy for me, honestly. To be truthful, it sort of unearthed a lot of ambition, and I was happy scraping houses. I was really happy. And then of course I say scraping houses. I got into more construction stuff, and I really enjoyed that. And this came along, and it was fun and everything. But it's kind of stopped being fun when we started getting all this attention, and when really I started to get ambitious again. And it was sort of a tough couple of months there. Did
you feel like your ego kind of came back into the whole picture?
I did. I remember, here's how I remember, there were a couple of other, Amy Acker and, oh my gosh, I should have come with the names, I forgot. There's some working actors that people know about. That
people are going to look up the movie Cerrone anyways, they'll see.
And so, and they had, when I went to LA to shoot, they had these great trailers, right? Where you get to, the trailer, right?
Sure.
And I didn't have my.
I don't know, but I've heard of that.
I didn't have a trailer, or maybe I was sharing a trailer with somebody, and here I am. I'm I'm supposed to be the star of the show, and I don't even have the
Number one on the call sheet.
number one on the call sheet. And I remember being upset about that, and then I had to catch myself, and I go, whoa, what's happening here? You know what I mean? Like, it was that kind of thing where I forgot. I mean, I didn't drink, and I was definitely. I mean, I was.
How was that like? Because
It wasn't comfortable for me. I don't know if I wasn't ready or if I just didn't. It just wasn't comfortable for me. I didn't like that.
I spent so much time anesthetizing myself that all of a sudden, anesthetizing, if you're not that smart like me, it means just getting drunk or whatever and squashing your feelings. That when, major stuff would happen, nothing to that degree, but all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, what do I do with these feelings?
Yeah, exactly.
And so that's when it's even more important to talk to other people and let people know how you're feeling. Did you have any of that in your life at the time?
Of course, we all isolate, and that's my MO. Is if I get uncomfortable, I isolate and I try to figure it. And what I've learned in this process is that's not the right direction. I need to go more and share and be a part of with someone else. So yeah, I made efforts, but I was not. I mean, I'm just being honest here. When that experience was over, I was sort of glad that it was over, and I was glad to get back to
get connected.
Being connected with people, with the people that I love in my town, which is Waco. And I don't know, I guess in some sense it was like, I think I want this. Maybe I should go audition for other movies or try to move to LA and maybe get involved with music and movies. I had all these sort of flickers of ambition. And then ultimately, I think it was not something I wanted to pursue, which was also a great awareness. I mean, to answer your question, yeah, I called a sponsor. I called my, what turned out to, I called my father-in-law and had very real conversations about what was going on. And he helped set me straight, and he helped me get a perspective that I needed to have.
And that's how you get through stuff like that.
That's how you get through
without
stuff.
getting drunk, because the bottom line is not every day for me is unicorns and rainbows, as they say.
That's right.
But you're going to have rough days, but you got to talk to people.
When you get to the point when you're saying, nobody understands me,
you're in trouble.
You're in trouble. That's right. Go talk to, go understand somebody else.
Dude, I mean, when I moved here, I remember I didn't have anybody kind of showing me the way in this whole deal. And I didn't have anybody's phone number. Mm-hmm. And you were the first person I called because I'd seen you speak at a meeting. They talk about in the program and getting sober, it's traction, a promotion by attraction.
Right.
Dude, you were a guy that had something going on. How do you maintain that today, I guess? Your for lack of a better term for people that are just listening to this the first time, your spiritual condition. How do you keep that positivity coming off you?
I mean, I used to think it's like, I got to do my part, right? I got to go turn in X many hours and read all this scripture and do all this stuff before I'm acceptable to God or higher power. And I used to feel like I had to jump through some hoops, clean up my life a little bit before I could approach the throne kind of deal. None of that is there anymore. Like, I feel, so here's the thing, like last week, I have 3 boys, teenagers, and my parents now live in town. My dad and I bought this old junky house to work on and fix. What we do. Like, I'll buy a house and I'll go work on it and fix it up and spend a year on it. It's more of an art project than it is a, way to make a living. But my dad and I are working on it. And then my son, he's off because of COVID. So he comes over, and it's my son and me and my dad, and we're all in this house, like demoing walls. And it's the most, in the moment, I look over to the right, look over to the left, and I feel such a fullness and such a sense of gratitude. And it has nothing to do with me being rich or me being important or any of that. And so
it comes from within. It's the same.
And so that would inspire me to say, God, I am so grateful. I mean, I'll go for a walk just by myself and just can't believe I got a body that works. And, I mean, it's just a different way of looking at life.
and we're coming up on the end here. A couple more things I want to hit. Like you mentioned, your father-in-law was this guy who was so comfortable in his own skin, who at the time you hated because you're uncomfortable in your own skin, and now you're telling me you're that guy that's comfortable in his own skin. I remember you and I were sitting down having lunch, and this is a window into the type of guy you were. You said, I just bought this house, we're going to demo it. And I'm just thinking about this project, and I don't know if it's the one you were just talking about, but I'm just thinking about, oh my God, work. And I said, how long is it going to take you? And you go, who gives a shit? And I remember thinking, like, that's kind of the place that I want to be in, you know, like, and that is, that to me is present, enjoying what's going on around you. One of the things that's been going on around you recently, just being, part of your life and on the fringe and being able to be in it once in a while. You're making music again.
Yeah.
And that is, I think that's a big part of your journey. And I think that's a kind of a window into being sober, right? Like just the journey. And how did you end up making music again?
COVID, boredom. So music to me has always been, it's like setting traps. It's like we've been watching have you seen that TV show called Alone, where it's like,
I haven't, but I heard it's good.
Right, anyway, they send people out in the wilderness with cameras, and I'm obsessed with this show. But I set, like I literally look at it like this: like I set traps, and then I go up and I see if there's anything in the traps, and if there is, I'll sort of pursue it. And that's how music is. And so during COVID, I just never check. I mean, before sometimes I go years without even being interested in checking the traps, and then just recently I did, and it was just one of those things that the more I did it, the more it just sort of snowballs, and now I'm just fully back into loving making music again.
It's subjective. You're making good music, dude.
Oh, thanks, buddy.
Yeah, from what I've heard, and there's a reason why. Look, I'm not going to get all into it, but people, where can people find your music? I
just Google Wes Cunningham. It should come up. But Bandcamp. Mm-hmm. And it's also, I made something that's on streaming on all the different.
Oh, just all the different.
You can stream it. Yeah. The latest one's called Vainglory. And
Vainglory?
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah. All right. I just want people to I want people to know what it's called. Yeah.
Yeah, because honestly, a lot of it just happens this way, but a lot of the songs have to do with me sort of dealing with the old guy that was into vainglory, the old guy that was into wanting everyone to love him and wanting respect and all this, and what it's like now, kind of thing. So the juxtaposition of that is kind of the theme of the record. But yeah,
well, from the old guy. To the new guy. I thank you so much for spending time with us. Do we have permission to use your music on the way out of here?
Absolutely. Yeah. Pick a good one.
All right. Wes Cunningham, take it away.
Hey,
Wes.
you know what? Wait, I want to say, I wanted to talk about you, Pete. How come we didn't get to talk about you? It's all,
because it won't
very
be as good.
one-sided. I wanted to.
That's the one thing my brother asked me, how are you going to do this? We were talking about the podcast. This, of course, being the first episode. I said, I'm just going to stay out of the way. It's not about me. I don't want it to be me talking into a microphone. It's about you and your journey. We'll have plenty of time. I think about myself all day. Well,
I hear you. But can I say one more thing? Is that I feel,
sure.
part of the reason why I don't like talking about all that stuff, I want it to be, I want someone who's tuning in to relate, like you said. And I want to be in somehow helpful to someone to say that, you're not alone, and that there's, you're not a freak, you're not a weirdo. And there's so much life. I love the name of your podcast.
The Payoff. The Payoff is real.
The Payoff. There's so much life on the other side of this deal. And, I couldn't be more grateful for sobriety. I wouldn't trade a thing. I wouldn't trade a thing. So thank you for letting me talk about it.
Wes Cunningham, thank you for coming, man.
Spirit
Thanks so much for listening to the Payoff with Pete. Once again, I'm Pete Souza. And of course, we are part of the Rogue Media Network. All kinds of good podcasts you can find at roguemedianetwork.com. And of course, you can find this podcast and all those other ones wherever you get your podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, other spots like that.
This has been Rogue Media Network Podcast.
Bros and foes and heroes. Gonna tell you about bros and foes and heroes. Gonna tell you about.
Hey, I'm Zach,
And I'm Mike.
and we have a fantastic new podcast to tell you about. Bros, Foes, and Heroes. It's the two of us looking into the world of comics, breaking down some characters that you may have never heard of, and some that are just absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, so Zach comes up with a character each time, and I go into it just completely blind. I don't know who this person is or what their abilities are or anything, and basically I guess we kind of go over their origin story and just some of the ridiculous stuff that maybe, especially Golden Age stuff.
Oh, Golden Age stuff is always the best, and we will make sure to highlight all of the shenanigans and just absolute weirdness of everything.
Yeah, that's right. So subscribe today and follow us on Instagram at Bros, Foes, Heroes.
And if you don't, I know where you live. Not really, but please subscribe.
Bros and foes and heroes. Gonna tell you about bros and foes and heroes. Gonna tell you about.
Hi, I'm Hank. You might remember me from a show called King of the Hill. Check out a King of the Hill rewatch podcast. These boys ain't rap, but they are funny. Find the podcast anywhere you get your podcasts or at roguemedianetwork.com. I tell you what.